We're now in Genesis chapter 15, verses 18 to 21. As you may recall, God has already made a covenant to Abram that Canaan was to belong to him and his descendants forever. That's what God did. But he did it without Abram, which means that God was going to commit himself to that with or without Abram. He knocked Abram out and he went in between the sacrifices. Wow. Now we continue today, and I want you to remember when I spoke about the borders of the waterways of the Garden of Eden. And then I spoke about the flood. And then how about where the land is today? I wonder if it'll refresh memories. Let's read Genesis 15, 18 to 21. In the same day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, Unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. And then it mentions some people here. Verse 19, the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, and the Rephaims, and the Amorites. Now, the Amorites, you remember that, the Amorites, the Canaanites, and the Girgashites, my goodness, and the Jebusites. All these ites that were in that land. Let's unpack this. I know it sounds kind of weird, but let's unpack this and see what we can learn from it and apply it. It was now daytime. Abram was wide awake, and God voiced the covenant now ratified by blood. Remember, he did ratify it without Abram. Before, in Genesis 12, verse 7, the Lord had said, Unto thy seed will I give this land. This was when he dwelt in Canaan just before he went to Egypt during the last famine. But now it was clearer. Unto thy seed have I given this land. And the boundaries were from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. That's 1,500 miles wide. That's a lot of land. Did he ever claim it? No. Significantly, the Hebrew people have until now never laid claim to all that land, although God offered it. Yes, you heard that right. From the Nile to the Euphrates. Trouble is, there were 10 people groups or nations that needed to be dealt with for that to happen. And it was mentioned. The first was the Kenites, also known as the Midianites. Oh, where have we heard that before? The Medo-Persian Empire. They inhabited the desert between the southern Canaan and the mountains of the Sinai Peninsula. According to Judges 1, verse 16, Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came from that tribe, the Kenites. Nothing is now known of the Kenizzites, but the Cadmonites, the next one, were a Canaanite tribe which inhabited the northeastern part of Canaan in the time of Abram. The Hittites were a very warlike confederation of tribes. See, I'm dealing with these tribes bit by bit because God said that they're inhabiting it. They're going to prevent you from owning it, but you own it. So the Hittites were a very warlike confederation of tribes. They inhabited the whole region between the Euphrates and Damascus, their chief cities being Karshemish on the Euphrates and Kadesh. These Hittites seem to have risen to great power as a nation. And as for a long time, they were formidable rivals of the Egyptian and Assyrian empires. Now, as you go through the Bible, you will be able to trace them and see them in the roles they played in the different times of the history of Israel. The fifth were the Perizzites, dwellers in the open country, the Canaanitish nation inhabiting the fertile region south and southwest of the city of Carmel. The sixth nation was the Rephaims. Where did we hear that before? The giants in the land of Canaan. Remember, there was a Rephaim army sent against Gilgoriam, well, you know the name of the great king that that Abram defeated. Okay, you know what? I'm having just as difficult time with these names as you would have. So these were the giants, and he killed them, and but he didn't kill all of them. Just the Rephaim army and all these weird giants. Oh, let's go on. I'm going down a rabbit hole here. Then there were the Amorites, mentioned before in verse 16. They were one of the chief nations who possessed the land of Canaan before its conquest by the Israelites. As dwelling on the elevated portions of the country, they are contrasted with the Canaanites, even though they were Canaanite themselves, who were the dwellers in the lowlands. They were also highlighted by God as doomed. So the Canaanites and the Amorites, God said they're doomed. Finally, there were the Jebusites, the name of the original inhabitants of Jebus, mentioned frequently among the 7 nations doomed to destruction. They were defeated by Joshua, and their king was slain. But they were not entirely driven out of Jebus until David drove them out. And David made it the capital of his kingdom instead of Hebron. The site on which the temple was afterwards built belonged also to a Jebusite, Araunah, from whom it was purchased by David, who refused to accept it as a free gift. Yes, the purpose of mentioning all this, I know it appears to be boring to some people. Unknown to Abram at the time, Canaan was indeed to be the homeland of his Hebrew descendants. It was later to be renamed. Got it? Canaan was later to be renamed the land of Israel. And today we know it as the nation of Israel. And do you know what the name Israel means? Israel means he who prevails with God. That nation has certainly proven itself as resilient. And folks, resilient it is, because God has put a blessing on the nation of Israel. Remember, the covenant that God signed did not have the signature of Abram. God said this land is yours forever. Well, my goodness. So, what did I mention before? God has a special place for the Jewish people. He really does. Pity that 3/4 of them don't believe